Hey, together, friends and family. Welcome back to your favorite marriage podcast. This is Kelly Bonniwell and Rachel Norton. Today, we had the pleasure of interviewing Mike and Susan TeBos. They both have adopted children, and Susan's written a couple books on adoption, and we get to talk about their marriage, and we got to talk to them about their adoptive process, and just they gave us some really great learning lessons through that journey. So I hope you enjoy this episode.
This is Together, an Ada Bible Church podcast about the world of marriage, where we attempt to invite you to explore the ways marriage works and doesn't work. From practical ways of learning to biblical inspiration, we invite you to listen to other professionals and couples to help enrich your marriage. Here are your hosts, Rachel Norton and Dr. Kelly Bonniwell.
So, Mike and Susan, I'll start with you, Susan. Tell us a little bit about your family. Let's start with, how long have you been around Ada Bible?
We have been around Ada for, I think, 13 or 14 years. Would that be right, Mike?
Yeah, I would think so. Basically, when the North Campus, as it used to be called, but now Knapp Street Campus, when that started at Cornerstone, was when we started attending Ada Bible.
Right. So we've been involved ever since. And back then we were involved in Teardown and Discovery Village and Bible study, and we still are, and leading small groups. And you've been in a small group for what, 13 years? Or?
Yep. So I would say the guys that I met was at Cornerstone. Kind of ran into one of the gentlemen across the aisleway, and he looked familiar, and he wasn't the guy I thought he was, but we connected, and so yeah, we ended up in a Bible study, and we're still in Bible study to this day. So.
That's awesome, Mike. 13 years. That's a long time.
I know. And you sure hear about you being invested. You're very invested at Ada Bible and involved. Yes. So that's exciting. So definite part of this church family. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Our family has 3 adult children now. They are 21, 23, and 25, and they're all in the area. Raised through DV and Lifeline and all those good things at Ada Bible. All 3 of them were adopted from Russia. Mike and I went to Russia 5 times in 5 years, and it was shortly after we were married. So, they were infants and toddlers, and totally unexpected. That's the part of our journey, I think, that always amazes me, that God would use us in this way, and we didn't see it coming.
Well, we have to back this up a little bit then. So How did you two become an us?
The us.
And how long you been married?
27 years.
Yep. Wow.
Okay. Yeah, 27 years.
November 24, 1995.
I'm glad he's got the dates.
Score.
So,
Scored points, Mike.
Yeah. This will be fun because I just recall us being friends. We actually would fix each other up with other people we knew. And over time, like over a year or more, we would get together and sit out on my deck or something, and we would talk about relationships and just life, and somehow we got comfortable, and I don't know, did something sneak up on us? I don't remember falling in love, but we did.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike, what's your version?
Yeah.
I mean, we fix each other up. We definitely always enjoyed each other's company.
Then you went to Taiwan, and
it seems to me one time I came back late after a date one time and realized that Sue was, like you say, it was a fix-up date, and realized that I think there's something between you and I.
Oh,
and
I didn't know you went out on a date before.
Well, yeah.
This might be a podcast first. The couple had been setting the other person up, because you had this great friendship.
Yeah.
Right.
But then something was changing. You knew it. So when did this occur to you? Or did something happen that made this known?
I think, that's the big story, is that Mike went on a business trip to Taiwan. And while he was there, he must have been thinking about me, because he brought back a ring. And it's a very odd ring. And I brought it along with us today here. And it is a jade frog ring. I'll pass it around. It's the real deal. And it's truly got a frog made out of jade. And I thought, that's an interesting selection. Who wants to wear the jade frog ring? But anyhow, we decided this was kind of a fun little opportunity to come up with like a little gimmick about it. So we told everybody, including Mike's parents, that this was the ring that said, no more hopping around.
Oh, that's funny.
And it's the truth. We did. We told many people that. And that kind of made me start thinking he's kind of getting serious. You were getting serious.
Yes, that was true.
How old were you at this time?
Pardon?
How old were both of you at this time?
Early 30s?
Yeah, I was going to say early 30s, probably 32, I would guess.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then, so he did that. And then I was in New York on business, and I was at Saks Fifth Avenue downtown with a bunch of different people, and we were shopping, and there was a wedding dress, and they were encouraging me. And I said, I'm not even engaged. And they were saying, you should buy it. You'll get engaged. And I'm thinking, this is so backwards, but I bought it. And then I had it shipped from Saks to Grand Rapids. And Mike showed up at the door, and there was a box at the door, and he was standing there holding it. He didn't know what was inside of it, but it was the wedding dress.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And he goes, what's this? And I kind of feel like that was when he decided he better ask me to, I don't know. That's when he asked me to marry him.
That was her subtle way of her saying that I think I'm attracted to you.
I think she's on board.
That's hilarious.
I guess it's mutual.
All right.
I'm going to go out and buy a wedding dress to tell you I'm attracted to you.
Wow.
It's pretty bad.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow.
Pretty
and
bad.
this had been a matter of prayer for you.
It was. And I had, we had dating relationships in the past and other things that, you just kind of start getting smarter or mature and start relying on your faith. That's what God says. Trust me. And so I remember praying specifically, is Mike the one? And God said to me, I know it's not like a verbal yes, but I felt this yes. And I actually questioned God. I go, really? And I trusted God, and it felt like it was, it was the right, he was the right one. It was the right thing. So here we are 27 years later. So God knows he knew, I guess, what we both needed.
Yeah, definitely. So now marriage isn't always hunky-dory, and sometimes it has some complications. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is, Susan, you and Mike have very different personalities, and that's something you had to adapt to and learn and grow. And actually, most couples, they marry their opposite.
Yeah.
And so, Mike, why don't you start? How was it like navigating that early in your marriage?
Being somebody that was always a pleaser growing up, and a laid back person, it was easy for me to adapt to a situation. And so, even though it's weird that I'm a business owner, because typically people think of business owners as type A, I am the opposite. I love to follow. And so when Sue and I met, she's a stronger personality and had ideas, and I followed, and whatever it was, I would adapt and find fun in what we were doing, or whatever we had to work on, help solve the solutions and stuff like that. But as we, continue to grow, Sue mentioned that, Mike, you have to make decisions as well and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'd like to follow. And I mean, there was a distinct time that I always remember. She says, okay, you got to set up the restaurant this weekend. I set the restaurant up, and she goes, are you sure that's where we want to go? I said,
all right, I had some learning myself.
Growing pains for both of you.
I said, well, you can make the choice and I will like it, but you wanted me to make a choice as to where we're going. And she followed, and we actually had a really good time on it. So, I mean, my tendency is to have her make the decision, but she does appreciate when I do it. And I've realized that sometimes if she's questioning it, I just have to push through those questions because it was my choice this time. So,
wow.
Susan, what's your thoughts about all that?
Yeah, he is very laid back. We are opposites. I'm very decisive, and I think that's kind of comfortable for us too. It's not that this is a negative, we may be opposites, but that's complementary as well, like on the color wheel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would get where I would struggle is when he wouldn't have a say in things that, he felt I could decide in, and it started to get heavy for me. Like I was doing the heavy lifting, and not that he was doing this in a negative way. It was just how we kind of morphed into who we were. And then we both had to start practicing to, me getting used to his personality, he getting used to mine. It was almost like we had to, just adapt to each other. And I would intentionally pull back, and Mike would intentionally step up. So I think there's that intentionality, if you will, that we just didn't blow it off. We knew there was something that was creating a little tension. And so we had to kind of dive into that and work on that. So.
Well, I think when we're dating, we really like our opposite. Again, most marriages, polar opposites. So if that's you, that's normal. But once you get married, you don't like that opposite. For example, you guys are talking about being decisive, or indecision. And, you, Susan, when you were early married, you maybe slowly began to not like that Mike was indecisive, and vice versa. Mike, you on the opposite.
It sounds like you had very aligned values.
Yes.
Yes. And so you were finding your way, like, to recognize each other's differences, but to kind of draw out something different in the other person, like help you get stronger where you were weaker, appreciating the strengths and the weaknesses.
Right.
But, the strengths and weaknesses usually are most on display when you hit a bump in your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
When would you say you came upon that first, like, real challenging season in your marriage?
Children.
And all our listeners say amen.
I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you can have challenges in many areas, finances and all kinds of stuff. But ours was children. We have a unique story. Do you want us to kind of give
definitely.
the backstory?
Yeah.
Okay. So Mike and I, when we stepped into international adoption, it was a little bit of a surprise for Mike.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I had been praying for that what next in our lives. And so when I brought up the idea of international adoption, well, actually, there was an article in the Grand Rapids Press. This was 25 years ago. So that's when they had the press, right? And so it was on Russian adoption, and there was somebody who had adopted in West Michigan. And I immediately was drawn to that. It was as if the Holy Spirit was like, this is a big deal. So I brought it up to Mike, and Mike went, no.
Yeah.
You answer how you
Sure. So,
you did it.
I mean, like Sue said, what's next? My what's next was I had a young company that was getting started, so I was focused on growing that company. So when the idea of adopting got brought up, it was, the first line was, well, if God wanted us to have kids, we would have had them naturally. That was my the quick, easy line. Even though if, in my younger youth, I would have thought I would have had the two kids, the white picket fence house and everything there. But as you got older into our 30s, then all of a sudden you start getting set in your ways. So when Sue brought it up, I was like, let's just keep thinking about it. And then my brother-in-law had an opportunity to go on a mission trip to the mountains of Chiapas, Mexico for a few weeks. It was probably I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 weeks there, but work with a family, help them build a building that they could administer pharmaceuticals. I better not use drugs there. I mean, the positive side of pharmaceuticals there. And so we lived on the side of the mountain, and this family, everything they owned, their gardens, everything was right there. And so I started playing with their kids. I took wiffle balls and a wiffle bat along, and you got away from the hustle and bustle of life in America and just kind of went, wow, this is what it's all about. And, people came back and said, oh, that had to be hard to adjust. I says, it was easy to adjust to go to that simple life. It was hard coming back into the busyness that we live in here in America. And once we adapt to it because that's the part of the world we live into. But I reevaluated and then came back and said, Sue, yes, I'm ready for adopting and starting a family. So,
wow. How many years had you been married at that point?
I think 2.
Yeah, we married. We probably started talking probably 2.5 years because we adopted in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I'd love to lean into this a little bit because you just seem like you got a strong leading from God and it like stirred. What was that like for your marriage when you were so stirred and you weren't feeling this call yet?
I think I felt like I pulled back and started praying more for God's leading in Mike's life. I mean, I was there, he wasn't there. And you can't go forward in such a big endeavor without each other. And so I prayed, and this trip was a huge changing point for you.
Yeah, it was. Yep.
And then what was that like for you? Because he came back and it's like, wow, we're on the same page.
Wow, I would say it just moved us forward, and it happened quickly. I checked into some local adoption agencies, and it was back then. It happened very quickly. Like we did our paperwork, and looking back, our son was actually born while we were putting our paperwork in. So it was quite interesting to find that out. So yeah, we adopted our first son in 1998. He was 7.5 months, and he weighed about 11 pounds. He was really small. He had lived in a hospital after birth and his whole time. So nobody came to visit him. This was a city that did not have a baby home or an orphanage. So they had kids that were staying in hospitals. And so I just remember seeing him for the first time because we had a picture of him, and, Mike's hauling up this big VHS video thing, like the local news. And I'm seeing him and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is our son. It was the most amazing thing I had ever experienced. Not knowing anything else to compare it to. We hadn't had children through, just naturally. So yeah, that was amazing. And then we did it again 2 more times, but things kept changing. We did go to Russia one time, and had an experience where we were going to bring home a toddler, and then we got home. It was a 2-trip plan. We got home and they gave the child to another couple. So sometimes we ran into these seemingly show-stopping events that would cause anybody to turn around and run and not do it again. And we just kept doing it. And we just kept following God's leading. So the third one. And so we did stop at 3.
Yes.
Although there's more story to that because we did find siblings over there. And just really quickly, our daughter has 2 sisters that were over there, and we tried to go get them. We found out that they were in her paperwork and they were already adopted. And I asked our agency, could you help us find them? And they said, no, Russia completely keeps everything closed. And I said, do you think you could help us by telling us a continent they were, are they in North America? Where are they? And she said that they are in North America. And I found them in 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah. It was, I knew which orphanage they came from based on our paperwork in our dossiers and so forth. And I knew their names. And so I went out in a chat room for Russian adoptees and adoptions, and asked who had adopted through this orphanage, and 5 different agencies, were brought up in the conversation. And I reached out to all those, and we found the girls in Connecticut, and they've been sisters together ever since.
Wow, I didn't know that part of the story. Wow.
Yeah, they've been to Michigan and hung out with us for a while, and we've been out to Connecticut several times.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So you had this journey to both be on the same page about adopting, and then this journey to adoption with, filling your family. How did parenting these adopted kids affect your marriage?
So I kind of look at it initially, and I said, "Hey, they're baby. They were, between the three of them, the oldest one was 23 months old when we adopted. So I'm like, they won't remember their past. So as they were growing up, I raised them just the way I was raised and stuff, and until they hit their teen years, and then there was a lot of things that started coming out. I related it more to technology, the kids having access to social media at a young age, and this is what's affecting them. This is why they have way too much information at a young age. And Sue's doing a lot more research, being an author, really studying and being connected to adoption, goes, there's something more than just that. And, started dealing with, I'm putting words in her mouth, but The Primal Wound was a key book that she read and studied and started trying to teach me that side of it. And I was kind of, okay, I can understand the concept, but I think kids are kids and stuff like that. And that was a part where we kind of parented slightly different for a while until she had the opportunity to continually giving me the information and me starting to say, yes, that's starting to make sense. And I had to readjust my thought process and how we raised and how critical I might have been of the kids on why are they doing this? Just because of this and stuff like that. So,
Susan, what's your thoughts about all that? So what I hear too is, so the first grade school, middle school years, those were, Mike, fairly smooth?
Yes. Yes, they were, I would say smooth as, Sue was just amazing with her being involved with them. Hey, if they had challenges, she was reaching out. Hey, what do I got to do for this? Help with education, get connected there. And she just really went through that. And I was probably the old-fashioned father that went to work every day and showed up for dinner at night and stuff there and hung out with the kids that night and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So,
and what were those issues that were popping up, Susan, when they hit the teen years?
Yeah, it's interesting how 3 children, all adopted, different ages, had each some work to do on what happened when they were relinquished. So backing up, when a child is born, they're bonded and connected to the birth mother. And not only is that connection critical for their security and their, that safety and trust, once it's broken, it can affect a child in a number of different ways. And then in many cases, kids go either to families, like domestically, somebody will adopt a child at birth. Our kids went to orphanages. And what I found out is that it doesn't matter what happened to that child what age they were adopted. They could have been adopted at birth. They could have been adopted at 3 years old. There's going to be something that lies under the surface that will potentially well up in them or surface in the teen years. That's at least what I've discovered. And we've got the experience as well with 3 different children responding in different ways. So with our children, we had one that was definitely carrying sorrow and grief. We had another one who was definitely carrying anger. And another one that was really passive that you wouldn't realize that had something going on. And I'm not saying that all adopted children have extreme struggles. It's not about that. It's just that there is something that we have to be attentive to and intentional about in their lives, that there's this extra layer beyond the normal teenage angst, beyond just the everyday, upset about the prom shoes or can I buy Nikes for the soccer, whatever. This is just something extra that can occur with adopted children. And we just have to be alert and aware, and it does change your parenting style. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you agree? We had to step up in a different way in order to walk with them on this journey.
Walk me through that, Mike. How did that change? How did you change? How did Susan change?
I mean, probably a lot of times I can recall pretty much with my morning devotion sometimes, let's say the last night I got a little upset with the kids and Sue's trying to explain to me, some of the reasons, deeper down than just the, outward circumstances. And I would wake, usually had to take a night of sleep to wake up again. And the next morning during my devotions, I just remember God as Father and kind of had to go, wow, if God responded the way I responded to me every time I made a mistake, this might be a rough life and stuff. And just had to realize that I had to show grace and start seeing the, that we, I had to be a father, but I had to be an understanding father and not just hit the fist on the table and say, this is the way it is, fix it, but to listen, to understand, to try to understand, see where they're coming from and stuff like that, and show more patience and stuff, I guess would be. So
that kind of pushed you to become a better father. And did that help make a deeper connection with your kids?
Yes, I think.
Because that doesn't always guarantee that.
No, it's not. I mean, yes. I mean, with the kids there, we definitely created different connections. And each, like I think with any parent, sometimes you connect differently with each one of your kids in unique ways there. And
you connected with
Nikolai or his son, well, in the biking and stuff there. So that was he grasped onto a hobby that I loved. And so him and I connected well there. And that's the, and his challenge with Sue was, that's where they were the ones that would butt heads and stuff like that. So I was the parent that could kind of keep that peace or kind of keep that relationship as parents to them. So,
and I would say that in that situation, you've got a 14-year-old, or I should even back up, a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old son, this particular son, who didn't know that he was distorting our relationship. I'm mom, but I think his anger was not so much geared at me, it was at his birth mother. There's this distortion that can take place and they can't put it to words. I mean, they were young when they were separated and it's so pre-verbal and they don't know why these emotions surface. Sometimes there are teenagers who just have the emotion of sorrow, like I mentioned earlier. For him, it was anger. And it's very likely that he was angry at his birth mother. And not because he was like angry, like I'm, mean or whatever. It was more just a why kind of thing. Like, why did this have to happen? And none of our kids expected to feel these feelings. These were feelings that surfaced very surprisingly to them. And then I think it surprised us as well. I know it surprised us as well. And so our hope is that, by telling other couples about this, that even whether you have adopted kids or not, or foster kids, is that, we need to step in to our kids' journey intentionally and be that one-on-one, like you were with Nikolai. Be that one-on-one, do something intentional. You're a mountain biker. Nikolai's a mountain biker. Our son is a bike mechanic today because of Mike. They have such a strong, fun relationship. And that's so important for Nikolai as he rebuilds his identity and takes a look at the past, in the present and tries to resolve that. And I would say the same for our daughter. And, she was grieving, surprisingly, to the extent that I would sit on the floor with her and just listen and accept that sorrow. And we're saying to parents out there, we need to get better at accepting our kids' sorrow and their grief. Don't question it, just receive it. And we've lived through it. And when our daughter, she made an epitaph, I think that's the right word. She got out her drawing materials and she wrote down her birth father's name. He had passed away already when we did a search, We found birth mom, birth father had passed away, and she had to grieve that. And she did it on her own, lighting candles and writing this epitaph that in Russian and things that made sense to her, real tangible things that would help her move forward, but not to forget. She always said, I don't want to forget. And she'd look at her veins and she'd say, he's a part of me, Mom. I'm half him. I don't want to forget. And I think, oh my goodness, I just thank God that he softened my heart and gave me the right information in the research that I did in order to meet our kids where they were at, because it could go the opposite way. We could have reacted, and it could have been, we could have been saying, I love you on one hand, and then they saw this other behavior that didn't make it feel like they were loved by, the anger that can come with our parenting styles, or just the frustration or the voice tone or whatever it may be. So I know it's a long way around your question, but
no, that was really good.
There's a lot of things that we can learn from our kids. I think they've been our best teachers. They have been.
Well, it sounds like the research you did really paid off, and you learned to ask different questions, look at things from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And even when you observed that your son couldn't receive from you, that you as a mom made space for him to receive from his dad for a while, that must have been a little loss for you, right? Understanding, you probably wanted him to receive from you
at
that time, but each child and each journey looking a little different. Now, we understand that you're quite a researcher. In fact, you've learned a ton about adoption, and you've stepped into a lot of other people's journeys and learned about their adoption journeys, and even wrote a book.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about what led you to write this book. Why did you write it? And then a little bit about it.
So this book is, again, coming out of learning from our kids and seeing what they might need that even we can't offer them, and what I felt like our kids needed was to hear from other people their age. Mom and dad are not so cool when you're a teenager, let's face it. And so I started thinking maybe there's some other teens, young adults that would like to tell their story, be a mentor voice, be what we couldn't be, and explain their journey, and maybe even give advice along the way. So I wrote a book. It's called We've Been There: True Stories, Surprising Insights, and Aha Moments for Adopted Teens. And it's twofold. I love the book because for adoptees, it reflects experience from young adults who are just maybe a few steps ahead of them in age from all over the United States. So there's over 30 stories in this book. The stories are from international adoptees. They're from domestic adoptees and people who are in foster care and adopted. So it's quite a range. So again, international: China, Russia, Korea, Vietnam, Guatemala, Ukraine, you name it. There's the whole list. But they bring their stories of being, teenagers, enjoying life. They're not really that different in that regard from any other kids, but they have this little piece that they tease out that says, okay, yes, 100% of the stories in here say, yes, I experienced this feeling, this loss, this grief, this anger, this anxiety. There was never a no, but there is a range of experiences. So while people out there might be listening going, I haven't heard my kids, doing any of this. Well, sometimes it's because they don't have the words or don't know how to communicate what's going on inside their heads and their hearts. So what I did is I collected these stories so that backing up a little bit, it's kind of like a chicken soup for the soul, for adopted teens. We kind of jumped in and did that. so that adoptees ages, I would say 15, 16 on up, even into, young adulthood, who read this, who get their hands on these stories, will find themselves in the story. So I interviewed these people. I sat down for coffee, lattes, front porches, Zoom meetings, you name it. And they just shared. And they just said to the future reader, we get it. We know what you're going through. You're not alone. They said, please listen to these different perspectives that are not your own and be open to what we have to say. Be open to the healing and listen to some of our advice. And then the adoptee who has been reading this can, at least I've recognized this, is that they feel seen and heard. That when somebody gets it, you feel like, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm not alone in this journey. And the second part of this is for parents like us, that we're kind of sorting this out, teasing it out, trying to figure out, is this just regular old puberty stuff that we all go through, or is this something extra? And when you read through the stories, you look at where parents show up in these stories. Like there's a guy named Derek and his dad. And somehow we're talking about dads a lot this time. Yay, dads. Yay, dads. But Derek's dad just really showed up in that relationship, and day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, lifting weights with the guy, training for a marathon, having one-on-ones, just talks about spirituality, about relationships, about girls, whatever. And Derek's story is in here. And just Derek looking back, when he told me the story, he was 25, he says, looking back and realizing how important his father was in his life. And it made such a difference. It was like a soft landing place for some hard things Derek was going through. And I just love that. And Derek also tells us in the story, it's a little spoiler alert, but when he was getting married, his dad was his best man.
That's awesome.
My goodness. It was just lovely. So for parents, it's just, here we go. You're going to find out what's going on potentially in your child's heart. This is conversation starters. You can read through the stories. Maybe you'll find one or two that you think might be important for your child to read, and you might put a little Post-it note on it and say, hey, this might resonate, and that might get a conversation going that you never would have had before.
What a great resource, Susan. When you told me about that book, it's a unique angle in looking at adoption because you're capturing the children or the adult child's voice.
Yes.
And so with that, Mike, big question for you. You're the guy who didn't want to do any of this. and now, Mike, how do you think it's positively impacted your marriage with Susan and obviously how it's positively impacted your family? Because now you've got a mountain biker who can go out with you now, right?
Yes.
So that's one positive with Nikolai.
Yep. And he can fix my bikes now too. So, yeah, I mean that it's been a journey with her writing this book. And it's been a God inspired event because it took her a while to find the direction she wanted to go. She knew she needed something to write and, proposed it in different ways. And then all of a sudden the idea of telling other kids' stories hit. And it was a fun journey to be on the sidelines watching her process this. And she had to hear some tough stories and stuff. So some days she felt her emotions and stuff. So there were days I could tell she had a tough story she had to write. And then other times the exciting part of it and stuff like that. So it was a cool process. And obviously it was good for me to realize that, okay, we're not alone in this whole situation here with our kids. This goes across the board in parenting. That's kind of what it is. And I think it's great for the kids to read that as well, to realize, hey, we're not what I'm doing here isn't so weird. Nobody's ever heard of it before. It's kind of what happens. So,
and perhaps often they feel like they're the only one in their world where this is a part of their story. Sometimes I was sharing with you earlier, Susan, that I have some dear friends who've adopted and 3 international adoptions. And I know one of the things my friend Joni said is before we adopted, we never heard stories about these kind of challenges. They just were not on our radar. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder, Mike, let's start with you. If you were to sit down with some newly adoptive parents and they were just starting to notice some of these challenges, what kind of encouragements would you share with them?
I would, I mean, I can give them my history of, hey, I didn't learn this quick enough, so I had to kind of do it the hard way a little bit. But now to realize that there is another layer there than just teenage and puberty. There is the adoption piece of it. I guess watching some babies and then, I'd say natural birth babies and realize how quickly they learn. Mm-hmm. I watch, and like, okay, boom, they learn how to grab this, they learn that. My thought process is, they were too young when they got adopted. They don't remember. I'm like, oh no, they learn. They're a huge sponge that with a lot of stuff was learned early on. And so there was this stuff they learned that got taken away from them. And like Sue says, they don't have a voice to say that, but there was a emptiness in them that they had to reconcile in themselves and stuff. So as newly parents, be aware of that, just that, hey, that's going to be coming there, and, look at it through a different lens than just, hey, they're just kids. They're just kids. They got one other layer there, but it's a special layer.
It makes space for it. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. That's awesome.
And then the other part is they don't have your genes. So, I mean, that's another area that I always said, hey, okay, I got an open book here. I don't have expectations. Hey, I like this and like that, but our kids are, they don't have the same genes. So the odds of them liking the same things are slim and stuff like that. So realize that they might do things differently and think slightly different and stuff. So
awesome. How about Susan?
Okay. Mm-hmm. What would I tell a couple with adopted kids? I would say examine your own expectations and try to hold those loosely. Mm-hmm. Because you want this child to become who God created him to be. And that may involve a few ups and downs along this journey. But if you stay the course and they sense your love and through your actions, your intentional actions, that they will, in most cases, they will shine and show their resilience, and you'll be a part of that. It's very fulfilling from that regard, I think.
That's great. So here's the fact that our spouses are a blessing in our lives. And sometimes we realize that, sometimes we don't. But in reality, they are. And even in your story, Susan, you were wondering, should I marry this guy? Or, and now you're married 27 years. That's amazing. Mike, tell Susan 1 or 2 things that you love about her and why she's so important to you.
Oh, that was an intentional pause. So, she's physically beautiful. I'm going to go the easy one right there. So there, but I mean, just by the time she put into that book, because she cared so much about our kids and for adopted kids, she also cares for me that much. I mean, she has a way of looking past herself and knowing the needs that I like. I mean, and for other people. So she just has an incredibly caring heart that she spent a lot of time helping others and, helping me and knowing some of the needs that I have and willing to sacrifice herself to fulfill those needs, I would say. So that's the special part.
Well, thank you.
That's a good answer.
Wow.
I think we can take that one.
Yeah. Take that one.
Yeah.
Susan, do you have a thing or 2 that you love about Mike?
Should I dab the little tears out of my eyes, right? Thing or 2. So this hasn't come up, but he's super funny. I guess the hopping around ring The jade rings should have clued me in how funny you are. And I think being funny is the very, it relieves tension, or it's a connection point. And he does really well at that, connecting with me, because again, I do have that, I don't know what personality I am. They call it type A, but just driven, and he can take that tension away by just being himself, being funny. I think also we respect each other. And that is a hard thing to do sometimes in relationships, and respecting each other, our differences, it really matters. And it's made a difference in how long we've been together. Mm-hmm. And we've had, like anyone, you have your ups and downs here and there. But to go on this journey, I would say I'm thankful I went on this journey with you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And little did you know all that God had in store.
We had no idea.
Right? When that ring came your way, like all that was on the other side. And when that dress showed up, when you were there, that wedding dress just there on the step, and God just continues to tell a beautiful story through your marriage and through your family. We're just grateful to get this time with you today.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for having us, you guys.
Yeah, this is
nice
great
to be with you.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Wow, that was a great episode with Mike and Susan. Learned so much more, and this season has been we've had now 2 episodes about adoption, and it's kind of a theme we're running with this season. Wanted to make sure to mention also Susan wrote We've Been There. It's her most recent book, but she wrote another book a few years back called Before You Were Mine, Discovering Your Adopted Child's Life Story. Another very unique book in terms of looking at adoption. Definitely recommend you get both. But hey, we hope you've enjoyed this episode. And again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. That really helps. And another big thing that helps is for you to rate and review the podcast. That gets us more listeners, the more ratings we have. And we just hope you have a great week. And so thankful for you to listen today.
Thanks for listening to Together. We hope you've learned a thing or two. If you find the podcast helpful, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your listening platform, leave a comment, and give us a 5-star rating. If you'd like more information on Ada Bible Church and its ministries, or someone to pray or dialogue with about your marriage, go online and check out our website at adabible.org.